This time of year, we are looking for those special gifts that will put a smile on the faces of those that we know and love. Today is my special gift to you because the guest that you're going to hear in the next hour is guaranteed to put a smile on your face and a song in your heart. Stay tuned.
There is the Word, there is the way, and brothers and sisters who find strength in their belief. We meet Faces of Faith with Phil Scoggins.
Welcome in once again to Faces of Faith. I am delighted to have you here as we steamroll toward Christmas. We're only a little over a week away, and I couldn't have a better guest on my podcast today than Kevin Williams. Kevin is joining us from his home in Nashville, Tennessee, or thereabouts. And Kevin, welcome into my podcast, buddy.
I'm so glad to be with you, Phil. This is wonderful. And you dressed up. You got your Christmas tie on there. I like that.
I try to compete with Bill Gaither.
Yeah. Well, he's more into the V-neck sweater kind of vibe these days, so we'll change up a little bit, but that's good. Yeah, I'm glad to be with you. You've told me about this before, and we tried to work out a date, and it kind of didn't work for a little while. So I'm just honored to be here with you today, and we're going to have fun.
Well, I want people to know who you are. And, of course, I've had some inside track into who Kevin Williams is. I've seen you in concert so many times, but I want our audience to know. And the best way to do that is really to just say, Kevin, share a little bit about your bio, your hometown. You're from a little Russell Springs, Kentucky. We want to hear about your hometown, and as we share about how you got started playing the guitar, because people need to understand that you're not only a gifted artist playing, you're an incredible comedian. You keep Bill Gaither laughing with the Gaither Vocal Band and those performances. You co-host his radio show once a week that's heard on over 3,500 stations nationwide. So we want to get to know Kevin better when he's not behind a microphone or not on a stage. So tell us what you want us to know about Kevin Williams.
I'm nearly always behind a microphone somewhere in some way, shape, or form. I love that. And what you see is what you get most of the time. I don't think there's really a totally different me to know, but in any given setting, you only see a little slice of the pie. So a lot of folks just know me as a funny guy, or they just know me as, I do a lot of recording sessions and I produce, so they just know me as a musical entity, or they know me as whatever, and or the radio host. I've been in broadcasting since my first job when I was 16 years old. And I'll take you back to the beginning. But before I go all the way back to the flood, let me tell you, at 16, I wanted to work in radio so bad. Now, was your first job in radio?
It was. Yeah.
Okay.
I've started out for 2 years in radio before I transitioned to TV. Yep.
And I loved that. I was 16 years old going to high school, junior in high school, and I think I spent several years as a freshman. But then by the time I got to be a junior, I would get off school at 3:00 in the afternoon, go and spin records. And I tried my hand, early on at writing news and writing copy and doing production, doing everything you do in a small market radio station. And broadcasting gets in your blood, it never leaves. And I love that. And I'm honored to get to co-host this thing called Homecoming Radio with Bill. And we can talk about that in a little bit. But in one way or another, I've been behind a microphone, since 14, 15, 16 years old. At 14, I was on a bus for the first time with the Rock of Ages Quartet, playing my guitar all through central Kentucky and any church that would let us come and set up a PA system, and I was thrashing on a guitar and I only knew about 4 chords, but I used them a lot. And so in one way or another, I've been on a bus since I was 14 and in music. And
well, how did you get started playing the guitar?
Well, growing up in Russell Springs, and I got to tell you, that's a beautiful place on Lake Cumberland. I couldn't have had a better upbringing. And I'm an only child, and that explains a lot, I know. But
now you know, people.
Now you know. And after this hour, you're going to realize this is a strange brain you're hearing from here. But yeah, growing up there was wonderful, and my folks were hardworking. Dad had a factory job, and mom worked as a clerk in a store, and we didn't make any money. I remember when the school lunch forms came home, I was in the poverty column. I
Wow.
remember that, and I remember how that felt. And
Mhm.
but I had great gifts, as you mentioned. I had a gift of a hardworking set of parents, and parents
Mhm.
that loved me and aimed me and directed me. And my mom had me in church since before I could spell church,
Mhm.
and so those were great gifts. And growing up in a little church with 40 people there in Russell Springs, and the little white church still stands to this day. Um,
I bet it's a pretty postcard.
oh, it is. It's beautiful,
Yeah.
and there's no way I could translate the memories into a
Yeah.
postcard, because that's where I learned to love Jesus. I learned to love music, and I learned to love people in that whole
Wow.
context of that little upbringing there. And so I was, from the time I was 12, I was playing. I carried a guitar around from the time I was in diapers. I remember uh, my dad had bought me this little kind of a toy guitar, and I was enamored with it because I had seen on TV, not only seen the Beatles on the Sullivan Show,
Yeah.
but folks like Buck Owens. I was really into that, and
Yes.
Johnny Cash,
Mhm.
and of course the Glenn Campbell Good Time Hour, My Lance, and I would watch the Lawrence Welk show, and they had a guitar player in the orchestra back there, and so I was not as enamored with the accordion as I was the guitar guy back there. And I would watch the guitar guy in the orchestra on the Carson show, and so I was always looking for the guitars. I don't know why, but
Any of your
that
family
was
members, your dad, did he play?
my dad and mom have no music in them. and
Really?
and my I had a grandfather that played the fiddle,
Mhm.
and he died when I was 4. I never got to hear him play. I wish I had,
Oh, and
but
wouldn't he enjoy listening to you today? Oh, wow.
well, that would be neat for me to see his
Mm.
eyebrow raised at
Yeah.
maybe something I was doing. Yeah, I've thought about that from time to time. Um, but I had the stories of him playing, and he
Mhm.
grew up as well in a rural area there in Kentucky, and so I was dragging that guitar around, not knowing what to do, and kind of pretending to play, my whole growing up until I was 12 years old, and we found somebody to give me guitar lessons. His name was Larry Beasley, still a dear friend of mine, still lives there and still teaches. To this day, they say he has taught more acoustic musicians in the state of Kentucky than anyone else. He played banjo for Carl Story and all the bluegrass greats, including the father of bluegrass, Bill Monroe.
Whoa.
He was Mr. Monroe's bluegrass, his banjo player for a time in his bluegrass band, and then he began teaching, and he taught guitar and bass and mandolin and all these instruments, and is just an absolutely fantastic guitar and banjo player. So he began to show me. I showed up every Friday night at 5 o'clock was my slot
Mhm.
for $7 a lesson,
Wow.
and my folks
That
didn't
wouldn't get
have
you
to.
10 minutes today.
I know, I know. And I don't know where my folks got the $7. To be honest with you, I really don't know. She had to skimp and save
Mhm.
and figure that out, budget that 7 in there, and that seems, when I look back at their situation, probably seemed frivolous. But my mom, knew there was a purpose in that somehow, and that God
Mhm.
was directing them.
Mhm.
Now, I'm an emotional type. I laugh a lot and I cry a lot, so you're going to see me tear up when I talk about these old times here.
You go right
Uh,
ahead.
but
That's showing us who Kevin really is.
well, my family know. My daughters say that on my tombstone it's going to say Jesus wept and so did he.
Kevin.
So that just comes natural for me. But during those 5 o'clock hours on Friday nights, I developed a relationship with this wonderful musician, who cared about me and taught me literally how to hold a guitar. I mean, I knew nothing going in. And it seemed like it was about 2 years before anything really started to click. I was doing all the rudimentary things, and he was teaching me to play by ear. He himself didn't read music,
Mhm.
and I didn't learn to read any music until I was probably 19, 20 years old. I was teaching myself by that point, and trying to pick up anything I could about music theory. And so, so this was all ear training, and it was so valuable to me because so many musicians who learned to play the page and don't have a an ear training background,
Mm-hmm.
they come to me and they say, how do you do that? And I don't really think what I'm doing is all that special. And but they have to see it on a page. They can't just hear something and pick it up.
Mm-hmm.
And God was giving me that gift through
Absolutely.
this wonderful man. So 2 years before anything clicked, and then I got to be I was 14 and I knew it all then, and I was starting to make music, and it was sounding good. I was liking what I was doing. I started playing in church,
Did you have
and
a
I got to
clue
tell
at
you,
that age that you'd have a career to come
oh no,
after this?
no, but I was sort of pretending and envisioning that in my mind. I was playing that out. I was a very imaginative kid, which imagination, not only helps you in music, but especially in production,
Mm-hmm.
any kind of, even the production you're doing today, you've got to see this thing coming together and what that's going to be before you can develop it. So I think God was building all of that in me at
Yeah.
that time, and so I would play along with Glenn Campbell or with
Mm-hmm.
whoever, as soon as he said, "Hi, I'm Johnny Cash," I knew that was going to be in an E chord, whatever that next song was. And I'm sure it was all pretty bad, but it was something, and I could kind of see that. And I started playing in church. And here's a side note, Phil. At this point in my career and in my life, very fortunate that I get emails pretty much every day from somebody around the world who says, "Hey, I watch you on the Gaithers."
Mm-hmm.
Never knew I'd have that platform,
Mm-hmm.
and they say, "How can I get to do what you're doing?" I mean, that's literally the question in various forms, but that's always the question: how do I do what you're doing? And I think back, I didn't have anybody to ask that question to. Um, and so it's a big responsibility when you get that to say, what do you do? And my answer is what I did. Start in church. That's always a great sound beginning for any kind of talent that you feel like God's giving you, or calling that God's putting on your
Yes.
life.
Yes.
If you can funnel that into a body of believers and serve in that way while you're learning your craft and while you're figuring it out, while God's showing you. And now I wasn't thinking of it in those terms back then. I just knew I had a gift and I wanted to use that church, and it's pretty much that simple. And I learned all these great hymns. I was talking to Buddy Green, a Georgia native, who does the hymns as well as anybody I've ever heard. But he came to Christ much later in life. He had a church background, but didn't give his life to Christ. So he missed out on a lot of
Early
great
church.
music, I think.
Yeah.
And we talk about that. And so then he comes back around to rediscovering hymns. Well, I had that handed to me on a silver platter. I just, learning to play guitar, and now Mark Lowry says, "Boy, you play the hymns like nobody plays the hymns." Well, it's just the way I do it, and it's the way I heard piano players play it
Yes.
back then, and I'm
Yes.
sort of extrapolating that and putting it on a fretboard. I don't know how you'd say what I'm doing, but that was a real gift, and so I did that for years. Played with every quartet, every artist around Central Kentucky, literally from the time I was 14 on, and didn't take any money. I mean, if they tried to buy a pack of guitar strings for me, I turned it down. I felt like that was, I was paying my dues, and I was offering this up as a sacrifice. And so
What a
God
heart.
honored
That tells me a lot about who you are.
that.
At
Well,
that age, that you would have that kind of concept of wanting to pay your dues. And in this generation today, I think we don't see as much. It's give it to me now, and I don't want to. I want to take the shortcuts to get to where you are.
now I was, I had a little bit of a lack of knowledge, not a lack of understanding necessarily, but I knew I had to pay my dues. I didn't know what the dues were. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was just out there trying. I thought if I come at this as honestly as I can and offer it up, I know I'm not playing everything right, and I know I'm not the best, and I know I'm not whatever, but I'm going to give you everything I got. and see where you take me. And so by 17, I prayed a prayer. Um, which was essentially, Lord, and I was going through this whole upheaval in my life of what do I want to do with my life. I had good grades in school, and so what's college look like, and is there a music degree for me, and or is it some kind of ministry degree, or am I geared toward, I like people, so am I a salesman, or am I, I was questioning all of this at 17. And the girlfriends I would go out with, they thought I was such a heavy thinker. That was not attractive. They were kind of in life, for the car and the moment and everything. And I'm going, what am I going to do with my life? And so
you could sure croon them.
Well, that wasn't all that effective, Phil. I just tell you. I remember I was taking one girl home one night. She got out of the car before I even got in the driveway, man. I just slowed down. She was on out of there. But those were great days. And I prayed that prayer at 17. And I said, Lord, whatever stage you want to give me, whatever platform, whatever that looks like, I'll be faithful with it. And I meant that. I didn't know what it was. And I knew the possibilities were that would be playing for an artist or a choir or a church ministry. I assumed it would be bigger than the rural setting that I was in, but I didn't really know. And then all the time I'm looking at the safety and security mindset that I had sort of grown up with. When you grow up poor and you grow up in a especially a rural area, safety and security are kind of first and foremost, more than achieving greatness or jumping out there or risking. And so I was going to a vocational school at the time and learning electricity. By the way, I can wire your house, Phil. You wouldn't want me to wire your house, but I do have that background.
Wait, my dad's an electrician, so I'm accustomed to the techniques that it takes to make this kind of thing happen in this room.
I had 2 years of vocational training,
wow.
and then I was supposed to come back and be like an associate trainer there at the school. And then my plan was possibly getting my state license to be an electrical inspector. And I'm thinking the whole time I'm thinking safety and security, and those are great aspirations, but God was dealing with me in this risk place, this place of surrender and trust, and this abyss of, follow me. Now that's a weird place to be sometimes, and it'll teach you a lot. And so I'm 17, 18, trying to deal with all that, and playing with, and I'm gonna take you back to 14 now, the Rock of Ages Quartet, and that was the first bus I was on. Those guys were so nice to me and letting me travel, and they just knew my love for the Lord. I think talent was secondary. They just appreciated my effort, my commitment, and I had good energy. I always brought energy into everything. I'd make everybody better, I think, by being in the room. I love that. And I feel like God put me here for that. And so long after the fingers have gone, maybe I'll still be able to do that, but that was always something I just enjoyed. And so I would lighten the mood. And if somebody said the guitar is too loud, I go, oh yeah, I think it is too. There's what I just always cracking a joke and kind of lightening the mood. And then I went.
And you do it well with Bill Gaither and the Gaither Vocal Band and the Homecoming Crowd. I don't know how those programs would come off without the glue that Kevin Williams is, that injects the light moments. Keeps a check on Bill, reels him in when he needs to be reeled in, and steered when he needs to be steered.
Check on Bill. I have to see where that's going to. I love that guy, and I'll tell you more about that too. He has a great sense of humor, and I always enjoyed being around people who enjoy humor. I would, Johnny Carson was a hero of mine in that, and so I loved his self-deprecating sense of humor, the way he would handle when a joke bombed. I mean, all of that stuff. And I'm watching that from the time I'm 12, probably on, and watching rapport with crowds. How you handle. If you're going to be given a platform, you better have some kind of skill to be able to handle that platform, and some dedication to developing a skill that involves leading a crowd of people that you don't know in a certain kind of moment. And so I was watching people like that, and watching the old comics, Milton Berle and Jack Benny and Groucho and those guys. I'd watch all of that because there was a certain amount of, just performance element to it. But then there was also an understanding and a rapport that was happening. And I remember getting that at an early age, and trying to think, okay, and I would imitate what they were doing a little bit. That didn't really work. And all the time trying to find out who I was, and not come
Now,
off.
were you the comedian in school?
Yeah, but in a good way. I wasn't, all my teachers liked me. I wasn't what you'd necessarily think of as the class clown, but I was always lightening the mood. I was pretty good at being clever, trying not to come off sarcastic, but sort of being sarcastic too. So trying to come off harmless, and there again, just trying to make everybody better and enjoy their day. Teachers don't usually enjoy their day. I mean, come on, you got a bunch of unruly kids, and so just trying to inject some levity into that. And then on the bus with these gospel groups, I think I was pretty fun hang. And we'd poke fun at each other, and I'd encourage people to poke fun at me. I say, can you believe that lick I played tonight? It was horrible. And those kind of things, just trying to get people to lighten up. It's interesting to me. Christians get so uptight sometimes. We are just great at getting stressed and uptight. And of all people, we should be so joyful, but we don't stay mindful of that. We drift away from that. And
life happens.
So, well, I like to try to bring us back to that, and especially this is the season of joy. Christ came to bring joy and freedom. So to kind of be a little bit of a spark there, that was always very natural to me, though. And so I'm 17, 18, I guess, trying to navigate all of that and see where that's going. And I prayed that prayer at 17, and I'm still working in radio at an adult contemporary station by this time, and doing everything that there is to do in radio. In small market, you just do it all. And I remember signing on the station. We signed on at 6 a.m. and our transmitter was out in a field, a cow pasture, about 4 miles from the station. And we piped that signal out to the transmitter, And so I remember lightning had struck or something the night before and flipped the breaker out there, and I couldn't get that transmitter to remotely kick. And I'm having to drive. So you put the LP on then, because you're going to sign on late. So you put the LP on, you drive out. I got a flashlight because it's a cow pasture. And folks who've been through a cow pasture know what I'm talking about.
Yes, indeed.
And I'm looking, and I get out there, and I flip the breaker, and I'm taking meter readings and everything. And I go back, and I'm signing on 15 minutes late probably. And then I've got the weather, and then I've got to pull some news together from the state police post. All that. It was pretty hilarious, to be honest with you. And
what training?
I wouldn't take anything for it. Yeah. I wouldn't trade that for anything. And I was developing a sense of community at that point in my late teens, figuring out what a community is and does, because through your life, you're going to exist in one community or another, not just a civic community, church community, business community. And so all of this is people trying to work together, figure out their role. And then if you have any role of leadership, you got to figure out how to direct that. So that was always interesting to me. And it started, I think, at that age, 17, 18, 19 in radio. I started selling ads on the side to make a little extra money, and figured out what I was good at and what I wasn't good at. So that was, and this would take me down a whole different road. I don't know if you want to go there.
Have at it.
I wanted to learn. I'm selling ads to make a commission, to make extra money, and was enjoying everything else I was doing. I had a 4-hour air shift, I think, at the time, and a little bit of production, and then was doing the news and blah, blah, blah. Okay, so to sell ads, you'd sponsor something, sponsor a weather forecast, you'd sponsor a newscast, you'd sponsor, whatever, or you'd have a certain number of spots per month. And I think our spots were about $3 for a 30-second spot. That'll tell you where and when we were. Okay, so you could sponsor Paul Harvey all month for like $100. Wow. Oh man, you'd get Paul Harvey every day for $100. Mm-hmm. So I'm going into the local stores trying to sell this, and local, the feed mill and these places, and learning how to talk, how to relate, how to be honest, how to be faithful. And I'd call on these people at the same time every week, so I'm being consistent and they could see me and learn me, and trying to sell benefits and this kind of thing of advertising on a small market radio station. And I didn't think I was doing that good. I just, I'd earn a little commission, and I'd go, well, I bet I could be better than this. And I got an audio tape called Secrets of Closing the Sale by Zigler.
Yes.
Now, I heard that tape, and he had some closes, and basically it was all just a wonderful way of viewing the sales process and bringing you to a logical conclusion of why this would benefit you. It wasn't any trickery. It wasn't any kind of fast, salesmanshipy kind of thing we think of. It was just a brilliant man who had learned how to meet the needs of his customers and verbalize that to train others. Okay. He was going to be in Lexington, Kentucky doing a seminar, and I took off work and went to Lexington to see and hopefully meet Zig Ziglar. Phil, there were 2,500 businessmen there. This was not a Christian gathering, a secular gathering.
Okay.
At the convention center there. I think my ticket was $25. And so I had, I think, $25 and a tank of gas and maybe another $30 for food and stuff, That's all I had. And so I went there. Well, I ended up buying 2 books, got him to sign it. I bought See You at the Top, which was his big book, and another one. And
so you're broke.
I am, and gladly broke. I had enough gas to get back home. I didn't eat, and that was good. But the best thing happened to me that day. I'm 19 years old, and I see him go through the whole day of sales training, other speakers and everything. He comes back at basically 3:30 for the keynote. This is where it's a 90-minute power-packed, you're going to get it now from Zig Ziglar. And if you folks don't know that name, Google Zig Ziglar. Mm-hmm. He's gone to heaven now, but he was one of the most influential people of the 20th century. And I'm fixing to tell you a personal testimony of why. So he gets in this he's a big enough name to have attracted 2,500 businessmen to pay at least 25 was the cheap ticket. Mm-hmm. In Lexington, Kentucky. He's got them all. He's told them how to sell. He's told them why they can be great. And in the middle of all that, he says, now, if you're going to take this that I've given you today and build it on something, you've got to have a firm foundation to build that on. And for me, it's got to be something that doesn't change. If a foundation is shakable, it's not a foundation for you. Now, you can build that on a lot of things. You can build that on a relationship with somebody. You can build it on a bottle of pills. You can build it on a bottle of booze. But for me, and I mean, I'm watching the body language in this convention center. They're all leaned in, Mm-hmm. He said, for me, I've built it on the Word of God because it is truth. It's unshakable and it never changes. God says he is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And in the beginning was the Word. The Word was with God. The Word was God. Mm-hmm. So he says, let me tell you about my journey. And he presents the plan of accepting Christ as a believer in this secular setting with, I mean, you could have heard a pin drop in there. Zig didn't find the Lord till he was in his 40s. And when he did, he said everything changed, and he gave that short, concise, wonderfully impacting testimony. And then he went right on with his presentation. Well, I was sold. I thought, man, that's what I want to be when I grow up. Now I don't know what that guy looks like playing a guitar, but that's who I want to be. And I went. He signed my book, and he signed it with a scripture, and he signed it with the See at the Top book. He signed it with the I am the vine, and you are the branches scripture. And so fast forward to 20 years later, or whatever it was, when we had Zig would show up at our Gaither concerts and just buy a ticket, and
Really?
he and his whole family be the audience. He would never call up and say, "Hey, this is Zig Ziglar. We'd like to come." We never knew he was coming. He'd buy a ticket online at Ticketmaster or whatever you do, you know. So somebody would say, "I think Zig Ziglar's in the audience." You know? So finally, one year, Bill booked him and said, "Would you come and speak at Family Fest that we do in Gatlinburg there every?" And he and his wife and their daughters came. They have 2 daughters and a son. And then had a daughter that had passed on. He wrote a book about that journey through her death as well. And that's when he found the Gaither Homecomings. When he was grieving the loss of his daughter, he flipped on the TV one night, and Vestal was singing. And he found the Gaither music and began to pursue that. And that was the connection. And I was playing guitar on that cut that he. So when we got him there, I brought my See You at the Top books in this bookshelf right here. And my bookmark in there is my ticket. And I held it up, had the date and time, the $25 on
Lexington,
there.
Kentucky.
And I introduced Zig Ziglar that morning. It was one of the most wonderful full circle moments for me. And got to just know him. And have since, I'm affiliated with their corporation now. Zig is no longer here, and he and his wife have passed. And his son is the CEO of Zigler International there in Dallas. And I am a certified speaker and trainer with Zigler International now. And so I get to speak and tell exactly what I just told you, and a little more in depth about his principles, which were all biblical and all based on a strong faith in Christ and what that could do to change a life. So to me, that is one of the greatest stories I could ever tell. And in the work I do with youth, and especially in Kentucky, my home state, I'm always referring to Zig, who impacted my life in such a heavy way by just being, he could have been a preacher. I mean, if you heard him, you'd probably think he was a preacher. But he was just a guy.
He had that style, that preacher style.
And
yes.
He taught a Sunday school class at Prestonwood Baptist there, I think, in Dallas for probably about 30 years, very consistent man. But he just was a guy who had a testimony. And I think that impacts people when you can speak from your personal life, about how God's changed you, what Christ has done for you and is doing in your life. That's more important than any song I could sing or anything I could ever play on a guitar.
One of the probably pinnacle moments of your career was however it happened, and that's the story that I want to ask you about. Is you connected with Bill Gaither some way, somehow, and that has led to an incredible career, not just in his music and with the Gaither Vocal Band and the Gaither Homecoming, but in your own personal projects, and then the connections that's one of the great things about Bill is he connects people. He brings folks together and for their benefit, not so much for his, although he, obviously benefits too, but what a heart the guy has. But tell me how that happened.
It's wonderful. Well, I was a fan of the Gaither Trio and the vocal band, and I had never seen the vocal band in concert. I had seen the trio in Lexington growing up with Gary McSpadden, that version of the trio, Bill, Gloria, and Gary. They had a band of backup singers and white suits and all this good stuff. Man, I just thought, this is incredible. They had horns in the band, and the background singers for the Gaithers were, Sandy Patty and Steve Green and people like that. And I knew everybody who had come through that camp had gone on to greatness. And it's something to study. It's really interesting. And so when I moved to Nashville in 87, 88, I was working, I'd taken a job with the Blackwoods. And then about a year later, I took a job with Georgia native Wendy Bagwell, a group called Wendy Bagwell and the Sunlighters. Wendy was the first to ever sell 1 million records in Christian music. And with a funny story he was a comedian. And he had a story called Here Come the Rattlesnakes. And it just took the world by storm in the 70s. First gospel group to ever play Carnegie Hall, first to tour overseas, all that stuff. So they were big in the 70s, and I was with them in the late 80s.
Okay.
On the back end of their career. I would travel to Atlanta every week for 5 years to catch the bus, and it was just it was wonderful. I that was just the best 5 years. Learned a lot from him, and he had a great sense of humor, and so I was sort of at the end of that 5 year period, and I was getting my recording session thing going in Nashville. A lot of people don't know what that is, and so if you're an artist, country artist, Christian artist, most of the time, the people who play in your band don't necessarily play on the records. A lot of times they do, but most of the time, it's another group of musicians who are trained at reading charts and creating on the fly. They're just, so they don't recreate music all the time. These are the guys who actually sit down and go, oh, I got an idea about this. What if we did this? What if we did that? And pretty soon a song is built. And I knew those guys. I knew the names from the album covers. I could tell you who played on every album, from Don Williams to the Doors back then, to Diana Ross and the Supremes, to you name it. So in Nashville, there was an elite group of guys that played on most of the Christian stuff, and I wanted to be in that. I wanted to be that guy. Felt like I had a lot to offer, and when I got here, I wasn't so special. I figured out that everybody is talented and gifted that's here, and so I'm just one of them. So I began to find my way, and the Lord was opening doors, and I was beginning to play on a lot of records. Ben Spear, Southern gospel producer and a legendary Spear family, Ben was producing a lot back then, and he had latched onto me and was using me quite a bit. And a lot of the other producers. First record I got to do in Southern gospel music that I got to play on was the Cathedral Quartet, which was a huge thing for me. And they brought me in, and then I was playing on everybody from the Florida Boys to Wendy Bagwell to you name it. Well, anyway, Ben called me one day, and this was in '92, and he said, or '91. And he said, Bill Gaither is producing a record, and I'm just booking the players. You want to play guitar on that? I said, yeah. And so he booked the musicians and helped with the arrangements. And I met Bill Gaither on that session. I said, hey, I'm Kevin, the guitar player. He said, good. Well, I said, very meaningful.
Big first impression.
So then he liked now the record he was producing, Phil, you'll remember this. You remember when Bill put the Statesmen back together with Jake Hess and Hovey Lister?
Yes. And
then he had some younger guys in there. He had Biney English singing the lead, and Johnny, what was the tenor's name? Gosh, that tenor was great. And anyway, he was reforming the Statesman Quartet because of his affection for Jake Hess and Hovey Lister. And we recorded Goodbye World, Goodbye.
Oh, yes.
Those songs. Okay.
Standard.
So I played on that. That was in 91 or 92. And then they liked what I did. They booked me back for another record, And so 3 records I've done, and I've had very little conversation, not even 20 words with Mr. Gaither through all of that. And he's just very focused, and he's into what he's doing, and he's you just kind of don't get in the way. You just kind of do what the vision that's cast there, and it's very good. So but I was getting a little paranoid by the 3rd record. I didn't know how I was fitting into the thing. Yeah. I went to him in the control room, and I said, is the guitar working for you? And he went, what? And I thought, oh no, I'm committed now. I said, well, the stuff I'm playing, I just want to make sure you're okay with what I'm doing. He said, oh yeah, just stay out of the way. And I thought, was that rude, or what is that? And if you know him at all, that's sort of the comment he would make. And here was the meaning behind that, although I didn't know what to make of it at the time. But these tracks that we were doing for the Statesman Quartet are all so piano driven, and I'm playing rhythm to the piano, and it's a supportive role. It's clear, and I enjoy doing that. But that's what he was saying.
No
But
place
he did
for a
not
guitar
mince
solo.
words. Just stay out of the way. Yeah. So in other words, don't get in the way of the piano.
Yeah.
Enhance what's happening. But well, yeah, okay. So when I tell that story, people go, like, oh my gosh. And that's kind of the way I took it. I thought, well, what's he mean there?
Mm-hmm.
And after I got to know him, I knew exactly what he meant. But that day it was a little humbling. And I thought, well, I know he likes what I'm doing, or he wouldn't book me back. He can have anybody he wants on this record, So I let that go. Phil, about 2 months later, this would have been in the middle of '92, about 2 months after we did that third record, a guy calls and says, hey, there's an opening with the Gaither vocal band. Would you like to go out with them? And I said, well, let me pray about that. Yeah, I'm ready. I literally did that. Right. And what was so funny, this is typical Gaither fashion too. The guy that he'd had call me chased me around to the session that I was at. We didn't have cell phones in those days. So they found me at whatever studio I was at and called that studio during the session and held while it's kind of interesting. And I said, yeah, what's happening? And they said, well, there's just an opening. And at that time, Bill's son-in-law, Barry Jennings, was kind of coming off the road. He was going to manage the group and the company. And so they were just looking for somebody to kind of
Who was the group then?
Pardon me?
Who was the group then?
That was Mark Lowry,
Mm-hmm.
Michael English, and Terry Franklin. I don't know if you remember Terry sang beautiful tenor back then. And so there was a window of time. I think Terry made 2 records with him. Okay. And so it was right in that time. And that Piece of the Rock album was the new record at the time. And he had just done the Oh Happy Day video. So about the second or third video. And the Homecoming thing had not taken off at that time. It was just on the creative side at that point. So I said, do I have to audition for this or something? They said, no, Mr. Gaither's heard you play, and we like your play and just wonder about your availability and your interest. And I said, well, what are you talking about? They said, this weekend. And I said, okay. Fast. I got to learn some material. And they overnighted me the stuff, and I learned about 20 songs. I think we only did 4 of those songs that night. I knew virtually none of the material we were doing, and played everything really badly the weekend that I went out. I played so badly, Phil. But they flew me up there. I had about a 30-minute run through on some stuff, and then they put me on the bus, and we went to Port Huron, Michigan, and Chicago, and we were. Horrible story here. So this is the end of '92. We're in Chicago, 5,000 people in the room. That's the largest crowd I played for at that time. And on stage with the Gaither Trio and the Gaither Vocal Band. And we are live on Moody Radio at the time. Whoa. So it's going out nationwide, everywhere across the world. And I'm messing everything up. I mean, Phil, I couldn't play a note right to save my soul that night. And
was it nerves?
I don't know what was happening. Yeah, probably a total nervous breakdown. I don't know.
Dennis Swanberg style.
Right. And it's my 3rd date, so you'd think I would get better progressively through them, and I don't think it would. And part of my little job was to run the soundtracks when they would do something with a soundtrack. Mm-hmm. The bigger songs all had orchestra on them, so I'd hit that. Well, we were using DAT machines for any of you broadcasters back then. It was a digital machine, but it was very mechanical and very haphazard, and motors spinning, and all that. And I had 2 DAT machines here. And then if Bill went to the pianos, I played live with Bill, and it was just very intimate like that. So he called The King Is Coming. And we don't have a set list. 29 years, I've never had a set list with Mr. Gaither. He just calls the song. So he called The King Is Coming. Mm-hmm. And I punch up The King Is Coming, and the little motor's going over here trying to get to, that cut. And he's wanting it now. So I hit it, and The King Is Coming starts playing. And then he tells me to cue up the next song about a minute in. When we got to that second verse, he tells me what the next song is going to be. So I think was Because He Lives. And so I went to cue up that, and I hit the wrong player. And I stopped The King Is Coming on the second verse. I can hear the chariots rumble. I can see the marching.
Because He lives.
No, I actually didn't push play. I just pushed stop.
Oh, no.
I actually ejected The King Is Coming. The king was sitting right here. So, it was such a climactic stop. It was horrible. And 5,000 people and live on the radio. And Mr. Gaither looked around at me like, what kind of idiot have I hired here? And I thought, well, there's my bus ticket back right there. I'm on a Greyhound. They won't even let me ride with them. I'm going back. And so he moved around to the piano. And it was just horrible. It was as fiery a crash as I can imagine. And he plays something on the piano, and they sing, and he says, honey, pray. And Gloria prays. And I'm sweating bullets. And after the prayer, he hadn't introduced me all night. And he decides to introduce me.
This is after the disaster.
Prayer, after the disaster. The smoke is settling now. And he says, we got a new kid traveling with us this weekend, Kevin Williams. Give Kevin a big hand. And they applaud. And he says, Kevin's the kid who stopped that track. He did that. And I don't have a microphone back. I don't have anything. And he said, and he won't look at me. He's playing the piano, and I'm over here. You will not look at me. And he said, Kevin, why'd you stop that track? And I can't tell you what came over me. I didn't mean this to be funny. I just yelled, for the love of God, I don't know. And people laughed. 5,000 people laughed in that auditorium. And he looked at me like, what just happened? And I got a laugh. And he just went, and he went on, and they began to sing Because He Lives, and I hit that track, and we did it. And he came back, and he put his hands on my shoulders. He said, you're going to work out. This is going to be good. And he did that. And I thought, thank you, Lord, for your grace through this wonderful man. And I know it was just a mistake I made, but it was a big one. And that grace in that moment was what I needed. But I think the laugh, God gave me a laugh, and it saved me. It was interesting. And Bill doesn't even recall that night. He has no recollection of that moment now. It's so much water under the bridge. And
but for you, it gave you the magic of realizing that you had this comedic gift of being able to retort back to him, and the crowd loves that.
Well, from that point on, whenever we would do studio sessions, because we didn't use that on stage immediately, Mark and Bill had this rapport that was just amazing, and became world famous with these routines they would do. And so he didn't need that from me. But in the studio, we would banter back and forth, and it was funny on the mics. And right before, we would cut something, and the musicians would all laugh, and the producers would laugh. It was just kind of like a radio show. And so when Mark left us for the first time years later, then Bill said, do you think we could take what we do and make it translate to a stage? And I said, I don't know how you do that with a guitar player. Nobody ever seen a guitar player.
You do it with a camera.
Talk. And even Jay Leno's guy, that started after we had done our thing, not because we did our thing, but just after. So nobody had seen that with a guitar player sitting here with a headset mic on. It was strange. And in fact, it wasn't a headset. It was a boom mic, and the camera would have to catch. Everything was upside down about this. And yet it was funny enough to make it and survive. And then I was developing, how do I come off not looking, he's much older than I, well, he's 30 years older than I. So how do I not look disrespectful? How do I appear engaged and respectful, and yet be a little sarcastic and a little fun? That was a fine line to walk, and people had to learn me. And I was learning to do things like in the big halls where the sound would echo, I would have to slow down my cadence of my speech, and things like that. And where it was brittle, I would have to warm up my tone, and just things that
radio training.
It was, it was all coming together.
Yeah.
But thank God it did. And he is great with fastball humor. He gets it, and he loves old jokes and old routines. He could quote you every line of an Abbott and Costello routine or a Bob and Ray or some, uh, and I respect that as well. So that developed into whatever you see today, and it's all out of love and both of us enjoying being funny with each other.
You've traveled to every state, right?
I think so.
I think 18 countries, 5 continents,
5 continents
around the world with Bill Gaither doing what y'all do. One of the stories that a personal story that I have that, and I'm not sure if I've shared this with you or not, but of course, Bill had a wonderful relationship with Jake Hess.
Very close.
And Jake moved to Columbus, late 90s, maybe some in the 90s. And I found out about it. And I was a big statesman from a kid from, I can remember, 12 years old, going to the City Auditorium in Chattanooga to listen to the all-day sing. And, of course, the highlight was the Statesman and the Blackwood Brothers.
Absolutely.
And so when I found out that my childhood gospel music hero was living in Columbus, Georgia, I said, I got to do a story on Jake. Where do I start? I got in touch with Chris, his son, and told Chris, I said, please, is there any way that I can talk with your dad? He arranged a lunch. So we go to lunch together, and I told Jake, I said, Jake, I can't tell you in my heart how much I love the man you are, the singer you are, the person you are. And I said, I would love to do a story on you. He says, well, Phil, there's only really one way to do that story. You need to come on the road with me.
Love it.
I said, my heart's racing, and I'm thinking, what's he talking about? And he said, my bus picks me up on Wednesday night at midnight. We'll drive to a location, drive all night, take Thursday off, and then we'll do a concert Friday night, drive, into the next spot and do a concert Saturday night. He said, I'll have you back here for Sunday school Sunday morning. And he said, I can't tell you right now the locations yet, but he said, I'll check the calendar and give you a call back. And within a matter of a few weeks, and ironically, the house that he had here in town was like 5 minutes from mine. I mean, we were practically neighbors, and I didn't even realize it. So my wife drops me off at midnight in the cul-de-sac that he lived on, and I'm cruising down the road at 1 a.m. talking to Jake Hess on his bus.
How cool is that?
I was a kid having the dream of a lifetime.
Right.
We stopped in Birmingham and picked up Bob Kane. He got on the bus. Ben Spear was on the bus. Allison was on the bus. We stopped in Nashville and picked up Jake Jr. He got on.
Wow.
We drove to Fort Wayne, Indiana. This was probably 2001, right in there. So about a little over 20 years ago. And so we got there, and I don't know any of these people. I wouldn't have known you. I didn't know Mark Lowry. I didn't know Guy Penrod. I didn't know Vestal Goodman. I knew of them, but I certainly didn't know them well enough to walk up and.
Sure.
And so Jake paves the way for me to do interviews with each of these iconic figures in Southern gospel music.
That's amazing.
We, because we had so much time to prepare for the Friday night concert, because we got there on Thursday, I got all my shooting done between Thursday and Friday afternoon. Then we get on the bus, head to Louisville. The concert Saturday night was in Louisville, and one of the neat things that I remember after interviewing Jake after we got back, I actually produced a 30-minute special that highlighted a lot of that trip. Oh. And one of the things that I remember that he told me was, Phil, he said, one of the neat things about the Gaither concerts is there's always, every night he called it a sweet moment. Mm-hmm. And he says you never know who the singer's going to be. You never know what the song's going to be. But he says it's just the spirit just settles down, and that was his description of it. It was just a sweet moment, and
Great.
um, that was, of course, the kind of guy he was. He was a sweet guy, and
Mhm.
but for him to take a perfect stranger and welcome him aboard his bus to tell whatever little snidbit of his story that I could tell in 30 minutes, and of course, a lifetime like his, you couldn't
Right.
package that in half an hour. But I tried my best. But
He was that way. He was just welcoming and open like that.
yeah, and of course they had his funeral service here in Columbus. He was buried in juniper outside, and put a bug in Bill's ear. You guys haven't been to Columbus in a couple of years, so it's
Yeah.
about time for you to make a swing back through.
I agree. It's about time. It's
But
about
um, there was a trip that you made, and this was one of those moments in time that you will always remember. I walked into the newsroom one day, and this was back in the days when they had the pink telephone slips that they would,
Oh, yeah.
if somebody called, the date, time, and who called.
While you were out.
You got it. And I walked in the newsroom, and somebody handed me one of those, and I looked at it, and it's from Bill Gaither. What?
It's awesome.
I'm getting a phone call from Bill Gaither, and a local newspaper writer that that knew Bill Bill was trying to get some video done of the trip that was going to be made out to Jake's gravesite. They wanted
Right.
to go out to the country and just spend some time reminiscing about Jake, and so they needed somebody to capture that. And
Right.
this reporter knew that I had some video background, and plus I worked at a TV station, so that's what the purpose of the call was. But it allowed me to ride on that bus out there with
Sure.
them to that site and capture the sacred moment of members of the
Sacred is a
Gaither.
good word. It was that. It really was. That service was beautiful, and then just that whole time following as well, because we'd all been impacted by Jake's life,
Mhm.
and me in his later life. I was listening to some of the Statesman and Blackwood stuff when I was younger, but I was listening to so much stuff it got drowned out a little bit by all the other noise in my head, and then. But when I would refer to what I thought was the greatest quartet sounds,
Mhm.
especially the 50s and 60s,
Mhm.
it would always go back to Blackwoods and Statesman,
Yeah.
And then by the 80s, I was into the Cathedral Quartet. I thought they were just tops, to me.
Mhm.
And I would progress through. I was into a lot of the mixed groups and that kind of thing. But then when I got to playing for the vocal band, and every day talking with Bill, he referred to the Statesman in some conversation.
Mhm.
In 1948, the Statesman, or whatever year it would have been,
Mhm.
affected him so drastically that he refers to it literally every day, to the Statesman quality or tone or approach or something.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so for me to get that kind of impact from Jake Hess in my career from Jake's later life was just profound.
Well, I envy you, my friend, that you get to spend, this kind of time in this environment, and it's not just being around the people, but it's being exposed to what God's Spirit does through the songs that are sung at those concerts in the hearts of the people that are sitting out in the audience.
I'm honored to still be doing this at 29 years with the Gaithers, plus all the other years I've had in the business, but to still be out there night after night, and I get to hear great testimonies from people
Mhm.
who testify to what God has done through the songs, or through, if I could tell you every time somebody said I was going to take my life, and I flipped on the TV, and there were you guys singing, and they'll say the song,
Mhm.
because he lives, I can face tomorrow, or something. And you don't realize that when you're just trying to get the guitar in tune and play your part and stay out of the way. And that's the bigger picture.
Mhm.
And the other part of it for me is seeing the faith journey, all these people that I do get to interface with artist wise. Um, for instance, Jake Hess, who was in such poor physical health for so much of his life. He barely had a heart muscle left,
Mm-hmm.
and had every kind of diagnosis you can imagine. And he still went out there every night and gave it his all and influenced people. And I mean, it took faith to walk on that stage most of the time. And you'd never know it. You'd never know it. He shined and beamed. I remember he had a tremor in that hand. That hand would shake. You remember?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And he'd stand on stage and he'd have that hand in his pocket, and that it was so you wouldn't see the tremor.
Mm-hmm.
People just thought Jake was cool singing with his hand in his pocket, But those steps of faith to see those people get on stage every night. I remember after Miss Joyce had passed, and Jake, Jake grieved, and Bill said, "Why don't you come on out on the road?" And after when Howard Goodman passed, and Vestal grieved, and then she came back out, because we sing to get through those times in life, and we share our story through the gift that God's given us, and to see these people of this caliber do that, what that meant to a little guitar player guy sitting over in the corner, just it's profoundly affected me in ways that I will write a book at some point, and I'll call it The Best Seat in the House, because I feel like for 29 years I've had the best seat in the house.
I envy you. I appreciate you for your talent.
Thank you.
For your heart that we've been able to dip into just a little bit and scratch the surface on who Kevin really is. Thank you for your friendship. I'm just an old news anchor that likes to tag along and try to get to as many of the Gaither Vocal Band. And I'll mention, for our viewers' sake, Todd Suttles with the Gaither Vocal Band is from my hometown. We went to the same high school, Lafayette High
I didn't
School.
know that.
Yes, Todd is from Lafayette, Georgia. And
that's right.
The concert that we had in Chattanooga, y'all had, it's been 5 years ago. Todd came down off the stage. In fact, before the concert, I had reached out to the PR folks and said, I would love for my mom to meet Todd, being from Lafayette, because Mom had worked with Todd's mother at the Board of Education. So, and so Todd, he came with signed, autographed photos to give her.
Oh my God!
The song was y'all were starting the songs on the stage, and I'm thinking, Todd, hurry! They're gonna need you out there. He was hanging, giving hugs to Mom, and then on the stage, he came. A lot of his folks were in the further back in the auditorium, so he came down off the stage, and we put Mom on the end of the row. She was sitting right on the end seat. And he went back and sang to his folks. And as he came back, he stopped at Mom's seat and reached down and gave her a hug.
Aww.
And my mom passed away 2 months from that night.
Really?
That was the biggest blessing in the last part of her life, to have been ministered to by the Gaither Vocal Band, and then to have had that kind of personal attention shown her. She glowed. Mom was sick, but after the concert, she says, "Let's go get something to eat." And we went into a restaurant in downtown. We didn't get home till after midnight, and Mom was 86 years old. Night. Yeah, that memory will last me, until I'm gone. But
I'll tell Todd that. That's sweet. That's very sweet.
And he's just on other occasions when I've seen him, he said, "Yeah, there's my Lafayette Rambler," is what we were called. That was our mascot, a Lafayette Rambler. So there's my Lafayette Rambler friend. But Kevin, we could talk another hour. I could talk to you the rest of the day, but
let's continue this another time. I'd be delighted, and we just appreciate you, Phil, and all you do. You're always so professional and so great in presenting the way you do, and you're just a good friend. We certainly appreciate you and wish you wonderful holidays. Merry Christmas to you, and good being with you on your program.
Well, thank you. I tell Kathy, your wife, and Olivia and Carolina, your daughters, Merry Christmas. We hope that the Lord's blessings will just shower y'all all season through. Thanks for taking the time out of your busy schedule to be with me here on my podcast.
Glad to.
It's
Delighted,
called-
and God bless you. Thanks,
it's called-
Dylan. Appreciate you.
It's called Faces of Faith, and this time of the podcast, we always tell you that regardless of whatever you might be going through, always remember, keep the faith.